induction hobs versus gas hobs. I love cooking with a gas hob. I can see that flame and I can hear it. Oh, it's really satisfying with it. It's responsive and intuitive control. But I hate the cleaning that's involved, and with the escalation of gas prices, I'll give you my take on energy usage after a few years of incorporating induction hobs into my projects. Now we'll get to the running costs of induction, but first let's talk kitchen design and the importance of the hob, or stove as it's called in some parts of the world, as the centerpiece of home living. I think of my kitchen units and worktop as pieces of furniture, actually. Furniture that I sometimes just happen to prepare food on. So in that regard, a simple flat piece of glass just looks great to have on top of your worktop, as opposed to a gas hob with lots of little bits sticking out of it when you're not actually cooking. Now currently induction hobs only usually come in a couple of colours. I want to choose the one which closely matches the surrounding material of my worktop. So in this instance I'll choose white for a light worktop, dark glass for a dark worktop. Next, it's performance, and I'm a really keen cook and I like to buy fancy utensils. I like to chop fresh vegetables, and slow cooking on the hob is very important to me. Very rarely, I mean like really very rarely, do I boil vegetables in water, and instead I tend to cook using olive oil. I use thick bottom pans, which allows the moisture in the meat and vegetables to steam themselves through a slow simmering process. And so an induction hob is brilliant for that, and it works in exactly the same way that gas does. It's got nothing to do with the way that those awful ceramic electric hobs from 10 years ago work. They work on direct heat, and induction works through a magnetic process. Now, cleaning is a part of any kitchen performance, and induction hobs are just so much easier to clean than conventional gas hobs, where you've got to pick out all the rings and then clean in between those fiddly bits. And if you rent properties for living tenants like I do, a gas hob can be a nightmare. Usually I've actually just ended up replacing the entire thing at the end of a tenancy, as the parts are so gunked up and burnt, regardless of how much scrubbing you do. And for my Airbnb properties, it probably takes me 3 times more time to disassemble and clean a gas hob than just wiping over an induction hob. Big worry I had when I was deciding to transition to induction was the worry I had of stained rings on the glass surface that are impossible to remove, a bit like what you see on ceramic or electric hobs. And I've been using this hob day in day out for 3 years, and there's a sensor on the glass which switches the heat off when it detects liquids such as an overflowing boiling pan. And whilst I've had a few burning disasters, I've yet to have a stain or mark on the glass surface which I've had any difficulty removing, and in fact the hob looks as new as the day I installed it. Things like rice boiling dry, I'd imagine, are the biggest risk to damage. I would imagine that would be the damage to the pan rather than the hob itself, but let me know if you have had any marks that you cannot remove on an induction hob, as this might be a deterrent, especially for a rental property. Now, I said we'd talk about costs, and let's get to that, and let's start with purchase price, and let's take something well known and middle of the road. We'll use IKEA as a benchmark and look at the prices of both gas and electric hob. A gas hob remains a little bit cheaper, and the price difference becomes a little bit more marked the further up the cost ladder you go, but not a crazy difference, so I'd probably discount that as a significant factor. Well, let's think about installation. Instead of a 15mm gas supply pipe, where you're using a gas hob certified by a gas registered plumber, for induction you're going to need to have a dedicated electrical supply cable with its own unique breaker and circuit from your consumer unit. This is because the induction hob has a high wattage to give it unique fast heating characteristics, and you wouldn't be able to use your existing kitchen circuit from, say, the old spark supply for a previous gas hob on the kitchen ring main, for example. But it's a bit like your cooker control unit for electric cookers, where they have their own little switch above the worktop with the little red neon light. If you are transitioning from gas to electric, you'll need to take account of running this new supply cable from your hob to your consumer unit. You might want to allow a few £100 for that, so you're going to have to figure out a route for separate cabling coming from your consumer unit, probably a 10mm twin and earth, although you might get away with a 6mm cable depending on things like distance the cable has to travel. It's really not hard to work out, but if you're in any doubt, just go for 10mm and always consult with your electrician. This cable will be, instead of running a 15mm copper pipe for a gas pipe, you would need to get air tested and certified by a gas engineer. You'll also need a special cable connector from your terminal, where the cable terminates in a little spur terminal running up to the hob itself under the kitchen unit, but this is all pretty standard stuff that you can get from your local electrical merchant. There's nothing stopping you running the cable and placing back boxes yourself, as long as you agree in advance the sizing and route with your electrician without having to cut and chase into the finished plasterwork. The cable will usually have a switch just above your worktop, which serves an outlet, a spur in the vicinity of the hob, switching it on and off, and enable the hob to be isolated for maintenance or installation, in addition to the hob's own local power on and off controls. And for this new kitchen, I installed both a gas pipe and an induction cable, even though I was going to just put in an induction hob, but I had never used induction before, so I wanted to put an emergency option just in case I hated it. The biggest challenge is installing a cable which is concealed. It was pretty easy to do though for me, because I was replastering the place anyway. And talking of plastering, a useful thing to learn is how to skim if you do a lot of these projects yourself. It opens up a load of possibilities for the self-builder, and for small jobs like this it's far easier than you might think, and a lot easier than trying to find a plasterer to do a tiny bit of plastering when they're all super busy at the moment. Now we need to talk energy bills and running costs in these strange times, and even though an induction hob has a higher power output, hence that thick cable we talked about, it uses a lot less power than gas, actually about half as much, to achieve the same result, and usually in a faster time, due to the efficiency of how the heat distribution works with the induction system through the metals, compared to gas burning through the air and losing some of its efficiency as a result. And with each year and each design iteration, induction continues to consume less energy. Gas, on the other hand, can't become more efficient, since a flame is just a flame. But even that said, electricity remains more expensive per unit, currently about 3 times as much as gas, although that is definitely going to change in the future as gas continues to increase in price. Using a property where I have a gas hob and converting BTU to kilowatts, I measured very roughly around 0.71 kilowatts of usage, and that cost me about 10.65 pence. And I'm getting charged at 15 pence per kilowatt. And then using a different kitchen with the induction, I measured around 0.33 kilowatt hours, and that cost me 17.16 pence, and that is at 52 pence per kilowatt hour for induction. So using these figures when I'm cooking at home, going into 2023, if I were to use a gas hob, it's currently costing me around £38 a year for this daily task of using this single ring to gently steam fry these vegetables using a thick bottom steel pan, probably over the course of an hour. £64.42 for my induction, despite the fact that induction uses half as much energy. So the bottom line currently is that although it takes longer with gas and uses more energy, it's still cheaper at the moment anyway. Now if you're a thinking person, however, you'll be planning your projects around a sustainable energy policy which prioritizes electric use over gas given we'll all be compelled to introduce renewable energy and electrical storage into our daily home management within the next 10 years. The legislation's already in place in the UK, and if you've a house, that will involve things like solar panels, energy collection and storage, inverters, heat exchangers, and even if you're in apartments or tenements, it will involve a common and factored energy network where energy collection and storage will be what is incentivised through both government policy and your own wallet, as renewable storage solutions will bring your bills down to a price unit that's at least similar to gas. Meanwhile, gas will become more expensive as it's taxed more and more, and that's aside from the geopolitical and supply issues that will increase organically anyway. Soon, I guess, as well as other advantages I've mentioned here, an induction hob will be far cheaper than gas to run. So what's the conclusion? Well, to me it's a no-brainer. Induction every time. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit me a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next one.